All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Vincent Smith, and I'm a senior staff attorney with Legal Services Northern Virginia. I just wanted to again take this opportunity to thank you all for joining us here today. This is our fifth webinar in our Reentry Month speaker series, and we really appreciate you for being here. The theme of our series has been Reentry in a COVID World, just lessons learned. And today we're going to be looking at that from a housing perspective, and we have a wonderful group of panelists here to kind of speak on that here today. So thank you again, as always, to the Fairfax Reentry Council and to our leaders, Leanne Hanna and Tia West, for their guidance throughout this whole process. Thank you to our sponsors, VPPA, for their generous contribution to this event. And again, thank you to our panelists here today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things, and then I'll turn it over. So if you have any tech issues, please use the chat function. The chat will come to all panelists, but I'll be able to respond to you directly. So if you have any tech questions or tech issues, please use that chat function. If you have any questions for the panelists, you can please type that in the Q&A section, and then there will be time to answer your questions at the end of today's of all the presenters presenting in today's presentation. This is our fifth of our 8 webinars this month, and so we hope you check out our Eventbrite page for the next 3 that are coming up. The next one on Thursday will be about employment, and we're really looking forward to the back half of our series this month. I think that they've all been fantastic. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mary Ellen Hutcherson. Mary Ellen is the regional community engagement specialist for 211 Virginia. As a community engagement specialist, Mary Ellen forges partnerships and connections between 211 Virginia and state and local governments, nonprofit agencies, faith-based organizations, and the public. Prior to joining 211 Virginia, Mary Ellen worked as an executive at public interest firms in DC, where she provided counseling and strategic planning for Fortune 500 companies, corporations, and nonprofit organizations. She graduated with a bachelor's in mass communications and public relations from Virginia Commonwealth University. And with that, I will turn it over to her.
Thanks, Vincent. Good afternoon, welcome. I'm very happy to be able to moderate this session on housing for you today. We have 2 incredibly knowledgeable speakers about the housing situation across the region. And we all know that housing is not something that we can fix in a month or 2. And it has been an issue pre-COVID for years and will continue to be an issue for so much time to come. It is not something that we can literally pull out of the air and fix easily. And so hopefully you all will learn something today. And if you have questions, like Vincent said, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to those at the end. First, I want to introduce you to Dee Johnson. She is the Director of Client Services at Alive in Alexandria. And then we have Marshall Williams. He is a case manager for People Inc. and Virginia Cares. And he is also the co-chair of the Fredericksburg Reentry Council, which covers the Fredericksburg area. So let's get started and talk about housing. So at 211 Virginia, we deal with housing on a very, very frequent basis. It is generally a number one concern for us, and I hope you can all see my screen. So basically, our job is to connect people to resources in the community, with housing being one of those highly requested resources. And you can see we do food, utility assistance, so we provide information on where they can get rent paid, utilities paid, employment, healthcare, et cetera. We are a statewide service, and that means we cover every city and county in the state of Virginia. So it doesn't matter where you're calling from or where you need services in the state, we can find you resources. We're 24/7, 365. We have worked every single day of this pandemic. There are always live people there to answer the call. Dial 211. Yep, that's the number. I get that question quite frequently. What number do I call? 211, just like dialing 911, except it's a 211 number. Toll free, that 800 number, that is good both in state and out of state. And basically, that is used when somebody's cell phone does not connect. And generally, those are the pay-as-you-go cell phone plans, and they may not connect to 211. You can use that toll-free number, and you can connect to us just as if you were dialing the 3-digit number. All of our calls are 100% confidential. And we realize dealing with returning citizens that this is really, really important. We are a program of the Virginia Department of Social Services, and therefore we are protected under our charter with the state that we share our records and calls with no one. That includes law enforcement, courts, probation and parole. We don't even share our information about a call with a family member. So a family member cannot call us up and say, hey, what did you tell them? We will not tell them. And it is important for this because people tell us a lot of sensitive information, and they have to be able to trust us that we have their best interests at heart to find them whatever services they need. Our call specialists are trained, highly trained. They are not volunteers. They are paid employees who go through continual training and updating on sources and on how to answer calls and provide that information. Right now, our database has a little bit more than 21,000 listings, and we have 6,000 agencies, and we add to that every single day. And so we get that from state, local, federal governments, nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, and some for-profit companies. For-profit companies is a growing area for us, and we accept for-profit companies if they have a free or sliding scale, meaning that their services are based on how much income a person earns. Typically, it tends to be hospitals, drug and alcohol treatment centers, counseling services, et cetera, but we will take them if they have that scale. So what have we been doing during COVID? So we began taking calls on March 10th. The governor declared a state of emergency, and 211 Virginia became the call center for the state of Virginia. And what that meant is that we were being provided information by both the governor's office and the Virginia Department of Health that we were passing on to people who were calling us. The governor then publicized to call 211, and we have been doing this ever since March 10th. We have, since that time, have answered, we just hit over 200,000 calls in the last 14 months, which is anywhere from 40 to 60,000 over what we normally answer in a year. We haven't answered this many calls since the economy collapsed in 2008. So this is what we've been doing and providing resources on since the beginning of COVID. And you can see financial aid for utilities is number one. And that is generally the way it is both pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And we figured that will continue to be our number one. This chart looks very, very different than our normal year. Food is always in our top five. In 2019 through 2020 fiscal year, it counted for 8% of our calls, and now it is number two. And that is a huge jump for us, is to provide food. Communicable disease and health departments has never, ever been on our radar at all. In the 9 years that I've been doing this, we've never had that in there, and now it is. And financial aid for rent and COVID rent and mortgage relief program are also there. But you can see a lot of the calls that we're getting pertain to housing. So for financial assistance, for rent relief, for homeless prevention, for homeless intake. So all of these are new categories that we have never really had a huge amount of calls for, and now the pandemic has totally changed the way we're doing housing. So back in June of 2020, the CARES Act provided money, and Virginia set up the rent and relief. Actually, it started out as the rent and mortgage relief program in 2020. And the mortgage program dropped as of December 31st, 2020. The federal government now handles mortgage, so you have to go through the federal government if you want mortgage relief. The rent program is still in Virginia, rent relief program. And that is for any individual who has been impacted by COVID, either through job loss, hour reduction, et cetera, that has not been able to pay their rent, to get funding to catch them up on back rent. And so if a person is $30,000 behind, the rent relief program will provide $30,000. The largest number I've heard so far is 55,000 that they paid off for somebody in Northern Virginia. They will pay all that rent. It's from March of 2020 on. If you owed rent for January and February of 2020, it does not cover that. So if someone calls us and we ask them 4 questions to see if they're eligible, we then connect them with the rent and mortgage or the rent relief program. If they're not eligible, then we will go through our database and search for housing programs that are going to be available in their area to get that to get some rent relief assistance to them. The Virginia Poverty Law Center has an eviction hotline. So if you have a client who feels that they're being evicted illegally, or somebody is not following the law for eviction, you can call this 800-833 number. There are attorneys who staff the hotline, and they can answer those questions. They do not become the attorney of record for a client. They will not appear in court with a client, but they can help them. They can find pro bono attorneys. They can refer them to law centers like Vincent's across the state to help them get help with eviction. The laws have changed a lot for housing, so it is a good place to send somebody if they're not sure if they're being evicted properly or if it's being done illegally. So recently, the CDC extended the moratorium on evictions of tenants through June 30th. However, a federal judge put a stay on that when the case was brought to federal court and said basically the CDC doesn't have the right to do that. The Department of Justice then filed for a stay of the stay. And so right now it is still in effect and it goes through June 30th. And then the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, in association with the FCC, has launched a new effort to enforce penalties against landlords who are violating eviction laws. And that is the website and phone number that a person can contact. They can file a complaint. And then the FCC and the Financial Protection Bureau will follow up with that. So just starting this week, the FCC also enacted an emergency broadband benefit program. And so again, this is for anybody who's been impacted by COVID-19. And the program provides up to $50 a month towards broadband, so internet service, and a one-time discount of up to $100 to purchase a laptop, tablet, or desktop computer. And that the program, the internet program goes through your internet provider. You will apply for them, and then they will apply that $50 a month credit. The $100 for equipment is a one-time purchase, and there's only one per family. So if you have 3 children that need a tablet, sorry, you can't get the 300, you can only get the 100. They just started taking applications this week, last week on the 12th, and that's the website where you can go, and it gives you all the requirements to apply for the benefit, and then you can apply right online to that. So this might seem weird for housing, but these types of incidents happen, and this is what causes a lot of people to not be able to pay for housing. And one of them is burial assistance. So FEMA has a burial assistance program that will provide up to $9,000 for a person who has died of COVID and who has a death certificate that says they've died of COVID or a COVID-related disease. That is the phone number. You have to call them. They have no online application, but they're Monday through Friday from 9 to 9. They say that each call takes about 20 minutes to do, but they will stay on the line as long as they have to. But that's the only way you can apply. You have to have the death certificate that says COVID. They have to have died in the United States, a U.S. territory, or DC. You can only apply for one time per person who has died. But all of us know that a lot of our clients have nothing in savings. They're going month to month, and if an expense like this causes them to potentially lose their house or become homeless. So I wanted to pass this information on to you so that if you do have somebody who has experienced a death from COVID or COVID related, and they can use this assistance, there's no income requirements. They do not ask for proof of income. You just have to have receipts and stuff like that. And right now there is no deadline to apply. So it's an ongoing program, and it's for any death from COVID that has occurred after January 20th of 2020. Okay, so hope that's something that you all will pass along. I think it's a really, really good program. We have resources available at 211virginia.org. This is the one benefit that came out of COVID for us, is we got a brand new website. And so you can see on here all the areas that we provide assistance to. These are our top areas. You can see housing is right there, as well as financial assistance to pay rent and utilities. And you'll see that we have text coming soon. Hopefully by June, we'll be able to have texting ability. We are actually in the testing phase right now, and it seems to be going well. So hopefully we will be able to launch that in next month of 2021. Yep. That's my contact information. I'm happy to talk with anybody about what we do at 211, how to get services. If your agency is not on our database, how to get on our database so we can start referring to you. I prefer email as opposed to calling. That way I can get back in touch with you and share resources. And that is all I have. So next, we're going to talk with Dee Johnson. Again, she's with Alive Alexandria, and she's going to talk to you about the programs that they have for housing and what they've been doing during this pandemic. Dee?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. Give me one moment. I'm going to share my screen here. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Danien Johnson. I am the Director of Client Services for Alive, and effectively the Director for the Alexandria Eviction Prevention Partnership, which I will talk more about. But to begin, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity with the Fairfax County Reentry Council to be able to speak today in regards to housing, because this is a very important topic. To start off the discussion of the Alexandria Eviction Prevention Partnership, I really have to start back and talk about Alive as a whole. Alive's mission is really to provide for the basic needs of the individuals in the city of Alexandria. And that is all citizens. So that's returning citizens as well. We don't have programs specific to returning citizens, but we do help returning citizens as well with the programs that we have. Alive was actually started as a volunteer program following an MLK march in the 60s. It was formed by 14 faith communities that were concerned with the rising level of poverty in the city and really just wanted to be able to do something about it. And to date, we have, I want to say 52 faith communities that are a part of Alive's congregation. Alive's current program deck includes food distribution throughout the city of Alexandria. We also provide food for the local pantries. We have the Women's Transitional Shelter, which I am also the director of. We have family assistance, which provides financial assistance, which could include rental assistance, utility help, as well as help for medical bills, as well as home delivery. Home delivery services are for individuals who are unable to go into the traditional grocery store or to our food distributions to get food. And they would be referred to that program via a social worker or case manager within the community. We also provide housewares and furniture. So if, say, someone is moving and they are in need of basic housewares, they can contact our program, and we provide everything from dishes to towels to vacuum cleaners, all small appliances. We did have early childhood education, preschool, however, that closed due to COVID. Now to get into the crux of the conversation about the Alexandria Eviction Prevention Partnership. This partnership was formed in the summer of 2020 as we were in the height of COVID and having conversations in regards to the evictions and the need for rental assistance. A group of us kind of said we had to move beyond just the conversations. We wanted to do something more. Not sure what that more was, but we recognized we wanted to do something more. Initially, the thought was that we would do door knocking, go door to door, telling people about evictions and the rental assistance that was available within the city of Alexandria. There was a pilot during the summer that Legal Services of Northern Virginia and Christchurch Lazarus Ministry did, where they actually had volunteers that did do the door knocking, of going door to door, looking at current UD list of those people who had court cases pending for an eviction, and going to those addresses where there was court coming up soon, and just going to tell those individuals about services in the area. What they found was, one, people had informally evicted themselves. A lot of the people that were on the list had already left the location, so they were knocking on doors to find that there was nobody there. Of those that were there, most people, because it was the height of COVID, weren't willing to open the door and talk to people. So we had to rethink our tactics of doing this door-to-door, neighbor-to-neighbor conversations in regards to rental assistance. But from that, we understood that we needed to reach people sooner rather than later. So through the Eviction Prevention Partnership, we really wanted to be a centralized access point for rental assistance within the city, because we recognize within the city of Alexandria, there are a lot of different avenues in which someone could receive rental assistance. There are nonprofits within the area. There are local churches that also provide rental assistance. There's the city through the city, or also there is the state assistance that is available. Most people know that as the RRP program. But what we found is a lot of people had difficulty trying to figure out the nuances of how to apply for those services and get the services that they really needed. We also focused on outreach to individuals who were at risk of eviction. We utilized our partnership with the Legal Services of Northern Virginia and the local sheriff to look at those individuals who had a legal court case pending for eviction. That to guide us for locations where we needed to focus our outreach efforts. At those outreach efforts, we try to pair them with additional services. So we would utilize our food distribution to also have food available for individuals who were coming to seek rental assistance, because we recognize that as you are having issues with rent, you're also more than likely to have issues with utilities, with food, maybe need mental health services. And so we really were focused not just on the rental assistance, but the family holistically, trying to develop a plan on how to keep people in their homes safely. And we also wanted to look at long-term housing stability, because we recognize it just wasn't throwing dollars and cents at the problem. It was also trying to help people, educate people about what their rights were as renters, understanding, just generally understanding a lease or understanding the eviction process, and to be able to meet people where they are. So we were really focused on bringing services to the communities where people needed them most. So our current activities include outreach and education. We focused, starting with landlords that we saw had a high level of filings in the area. We were able to develop a relationship with one of the major landlords in the area and have been majorly successful with helping them to help their residents by having continued outreach on site on a weekly basis, so that the residents are able to come get help with filling out their RRP application, understanding letters or notices that they might be receiving in the mail, and just to ask general questions. During these outreach events, again, as I said, we would try to pair it with other services. And so we've had the Office of Housing, as well as the Office of Community Services, to send representatives from their offices to also further assist individuals during these events. We also paired with the Department of Health with respect to vaccines, as we're trying to get the word out of getting people registered for vaccines and then also scheduled for vaccines. And so we were able to, again, help individuals as they were coming for rental assistance to register, to get scheduled so that they can get vaccinated. And then overall, just providing service navigation. So again, understanding the nuances of rental assistance, that if you're having issues with housing, that there were other issues that the person might be having. My SNAP benefits got cut off, or I don't know how to apply for SNAP benefits. I need some emergency help for transportation, or I am getting evicted in next week and I need help with storage. So we would help work through these issues with residents at the outreach events. And I can say from the start to now, we have had an overabundance of calls. Current staff is myself and one case manager, and between the two of us, we have a caseload of triple digits between us. So definitely look for more help, and we rely on the assistance of volunteers to help answer some of the calls that we have. But we do have an extensive training program for our volunteers because of the nature of what it is that we're doing. So really, to go forward with the conversation and talk more about evictions, we really wanted to, I apologize, look at the eviction process, because one of the things that we found with residents is that they did not understand what the process was to be evicted. They would get that initial notice, and a lot of people would self-evict turn in their keys and go. So helping to provide that education to the community in regards to what is the eviction process and what are the steps to take. And again, trying to reach people sooner rather than later in the process so that we can effectively stop an eviction and keep people in their homes. Right now in the process, this is a brief infographic of what the process is towards eviction. A person would get a 14-day pay or quit notice. And that pay or quit notice is very legalese speak. And a lot of times people don't understand exactly what that letter means. So that notice says, if you don't pay whatever you owe in rental arrears, you have to leave. So, however, there are additional steps in the process before a person is actually evicted. And most people did not understand that. And so they would get that notice and immediately go to the landlord and turn in their keys. So from here, we would really provide education on the steps of the eviction process and help people to understand, what needed to occur before an eviction could actually be executed. Through our partnership with LSNV, we were able to take a deeper dive into the eviction data and really get a good idea about what was going on with respect to evictions in the city of Alexandria. This is data from 2020. So as you can see, the numbers, they might seem low, but again, we have to look at this is due to the height of the pandemic and there were protections in place. Of the 2,700 unlawful detainer filings, 1,500 being dismissed. And those that were dismissed could have been dismissed for a number of reasons. Most of them, I will say, were dismissed because we were able to, through rental assistance programs, get the balance paid. And so that was able to keep the individual or family in their home. That's generally our focus when we go out and we're working with an individual. We're trying to find the best means to be able to keep someone in their home. And that's why generally we will focus on having someone to apply for the state program through RRP because they're able to get the most money from that program, because RRP currently pays back to April 2020 for eligible benefits, and they will pay 3 months ahead. So now they're currently paying out to the month of August. As we looked at data from the previous year prior to COVID, 2019, looking at last year coming into this year, trying to get a picture of what the eviction climate looked like, we can definitely see the increase in the amount that judgments, because back in 2019, the median amount that someone owed was a little over $2,500. This year, the median amount is over $9,000. We are seeing people with balances of $15,000 to $20,000 or more, based on the fact that they have not been able to work during the COVID crisis. When we look at writ data, and a writ is an actual judgment for eviction, the sheriff received 423 unduplicated writs. Of those, 104 were paid. 43 of those families actually were provided a CDC declaration. And as Mary Ellen said, the CDC moratorium is going to be ending quite soon, so that protection will no longer be there. Of those that were actually evicted, there were only 63. And currently we have 20, actually to date, a little bit over 20 evictions currently pending. So looking at next steps, we looked at challenges and the recommendations. The overall barriers have been to affordability, a lack of income. We're seeing that people don't have the income to sustain the housing market within the city of Alexandria. And we're also seeing larger and larger family compositions. So families are doubling up. So you're seeing multi-generations living in the same home. We're also seeing issues with language and culture. So a lot of times issues have come up where you have a client or resident who speaks another language and their landlord is unable to assist them because of that. The state RRP application process is totally online. So access to technology has been an issue. And the overall completion of the application itself is a barrier. It takes an ideal client. And when I say an ideal client, that's the person that has everything that they need to be able to apply, between 1 to 4 hours in probably 1 to 2 sittings to be able to complete the application. Then there's the application follow-up of being able to find out the status of the application. If anything is missing from the application, it usually takes about 45 days for the application to be processed. And so of course, during that time, the person is still racking up dollars on their rent. Then there is the issue of the month-to-month lease. Oftentimes with month-to-month leases, this month you pay $1,400, but next month the lease is $1,500. And that difference in the amounts presents a problem with the state application, because whatever the amount is that's on the lease, that's the amount that they're going to pay. Ongoing challenges that we've seen is there's definitely the need for intensive case management and service navigation. The continued language and literacy barriers of not really understanding the eviction process, overcoming the mistrust and issues with immigration status. You do not have to be of legal status to apply for most of the rental assistance. However, a lot of individuals don't trust that and do not want to apply for something where their information is going to go to the state or the city, and they would rather go to other nonprofit organizations. And local nonprofits actually have, it's less money that the person can get towards their rental amount. Then we are finding roommate and leasing issues where we have come in contact with individuals where just a church friend took it upon themselves to want to do something good in renting a place for someone, not intending to live there themselves, but their name is on the lease. However, it's Jill and Jane that actually live in the apartment. And they're now being evicted because they can't pay the rent. And however, the person whose name is on the lease, they have no access to, so they have no way of getting in contact with that person so that they can apply for assistance on their behalf. Also, just the overall communication and follow-up between landlord and tenants. The relationship can be very tenuous between the landlord and the tenant, and therefore the communication between them, it can suffer. So we try to be that go-between and help individuals as they're going through this process. Then also one of the things that we're seeing is the non-renewal of leases. So utilizing this as an opportunity for landlords to just get tenants out of the space because they really just want the property back. And again, the self-evictions and overall just data collection. As we're collaborating across organizations, there's the need to have that communication, and it makes it difficult for data collection from multiple sources as we all use different systems to manage our data. Overall recommendations going forward is continued outreach. The outreach that we've done within the community has been very helpful. With one property management company, we've been able to help them to secure over $1 million since our start back in November. And we want to continue with our plans of intensive case management and service navigation. So we're looking to hire additional staff for that purpose. However, we recognize there's a need to review and revise regulations and requirements for housing options because not everybody falls within the certain guidelines for credit or for the income that is necessary for a specific place. Also, there needs to be a creation for a shared data system so that we can be able to share data more easily and also be able to see where there are trends and where we might need to focus our efforts. There needs to be continued prevention and education. Also looking at accessibility because we have now become everything technology based and not everybody has access to the internet or to a smartphone to be able to access Zoom or Teams or to do an application online. And then overall, just greater collaboration across community resources so that we can better serve the individuals and respond to the need because again, that moratorium is going to end soon and there is going to be a heightened need for rental assistance and services within the community. So I thank you all for giving me the time and opportunity, and I will turn it back over to Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Dee. That was a lot of really, really good information. And we'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have questions, go ahead and enter it. And once Marshall's finished speaking, we will go ahead and answer those questions for you. So next is going to be Marshall Williams. And like I said, he is a case manager with Virginia Cares and People Incorporated. And Marshall, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be talking about the housing opportunities that we have through Virginia Cares, but also what are those disparities that we have when it comes to the barriers that we work with the individuals who have been incarcerated. One of the things that we found mostly that was important for us is knowing that working with individuals that are on a regular basis that come from the background of, say, for instance, when it comes to a sexual offender or a person who has a background to where their housing plans are not able to be met. These are one of the biggest factors that we have when it comes to that. So let me go ahead and share this with you guys. Virginia Cares is an action reentry system, began as a pre-release program in Roanoke Community Action Agency. Total Action Progress, the TAP agency, later expanded into the dedicated program serving for ex-offenders for the CARES Incorporated in 1979. In the mid-90s, CARES joined with 8 other offender reentry programs in Virginia to do pre and post-incarcerated service, which is our PAPIS coalition. This was done to eliminate direct competition for funding. CARES is the only statewide agency in this coalition. CARES receives general funding money from the Virginia General Assembly through Virginia Department of General Justice Services, DCJS. CARES also receives federal community service block grants funds through the Virginia Department of Social Service and Office of Community Services. We operate 9 different service sites throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. All of the service sites are direct collaborations between CARES and 6 local agency or community action agencies. The CARES locations we have in Abington, Virginia, Christiansburg, Covington, Fredericksburg, Culpeper, Fauquier, and Warrenton, Lynchburg, Newport News, and Hampton, Petersburg, Roanoke, and Manassas through People, Inc. Services that we provide are pre-release workshops, post-release enrollments, employment services, case management, referrals for housing and financial essay, peer support groups, and emergency services. Housing referrals through Virginia CARES define housing referrals as referring participants to any resource for housing assistance. In the past 2 years, FY19 and 20, Virginia CARES has assisted close to 1,400 returning citizens with housing referrals. The barriers that we face mostly when it comes to housing, which funding, lack of shelters, public housing policies, long waiting lists for housing, time limits after incarceration, lack of transportation, no prior references, overcharging of landlords or property owners, and sex offender status, like I talked about earlier. Opportunities for housing, the collaboration with other programs, helpful landlords, Oxford houses, boarding room houses, and reentry councils are definitely sufficient to have when you are working with individuals who have a background. Here are some of the guys and some of the women that are in our program that have met. Mr. Melvin Robinson found himself in a situation that he had neither planned or anticipated. The owner of a house he was renting decided to sell their property. Mr. Robinson was given 30 days to pack his belongings and leave. Because Mr. Robinson was an ex-offender, it was difficult for him to find housing. He enrolled in Virginia CARES program in Christiansburg and was assisted with funding through housing. The Virginia CARES ex-offender reentry program of New River Valley staff was able to access him to their funding. Homeless and housing program. He was able to stay in the boarding house for a time, and then finally he was able to move into his own apartment with Virginia CARES. Robinson says he owes his success to mainly God for one of the also Virginia CARES programs. And also Joe, he was homeless, living in a tent in the mountains of Wise County. He had contacted Virginia CARES staff about 2 months ago and early in the program. Joe had served for some of his disability checks and had found an apartment in the Meadowview area. Virginia CARES staff was able to negotiate with the landlord on Joe's behalf and lobby for him to be able to rent his apartment since Joe does not have transportation. CARES staff and GPS coordinates and Joe and his composite staff helped Joe load everything he owned into the staff's small Honda Civic. Staff drove him to the apartment in Meadowview and helped Joe move in. CARES was able to pay $200 towards his first month's rent through the CARES program. Staff spoke with Joe often, and he is in the process of trying to get his custody of his son. He is also working the odd jobs to do some supplemental of his income and also for his disability check. His fiance has recently moved in with him. So moving forward with Virginia CARES, believing to eradicate housing barriers for returning citizens in Virginia, there is a need of some type of temporary bridge housing with the gradual financial responsibility. We have been contemplating a strategy of 1 year, maximum lodging with the initiation of no cost to returning citizens. The first 90 days, the returning citizens will have to attend an on-site mandatory life skills meeting. The second 90 days will consist of obtaining employment with the minimum rent payment, start paying and financial obligations for that, depending on court fees, DMV fees, such on and so forth, and then opening a mandatory savings account. The third or the 90 days consist of attending an off-site housing workshop and seminars, stepping into higher responsibility and contributing more to the savings account. The last 90 days will consist of the final real-life rental responsibility, during which that time they will be assisting in finding permanent housing. So we want to keep that in mind, that all will be done while maintaining employment. So what is one of our biggest factors? Our biggest factors when you're working with the individuals that have been incarcerated are those barriers that we spoke of. And one of the best things that we found that actually works is actually putting them through the program with Virginia Cares and People Incorporated. But see, sometimes what we tend to forget is that, what are these barriers? Sometimes we want to think that are these handouts that we're giving individuals, and we want to make sure that that's not what's actually happening. When you're thinking of housing, you have to also think of the fundamentals of keeping housing. So those step-by-step procedures, making sure that the individuals have the training. We don't want to just put you in a housing program and then that doesn't fit for you. So the evaluation and assessments that are done prior to going into housing, we want to make sure that these steps are followed. Making sure that individuals do have a longevity when it comes to their job opportunities also, so they can keep the housing that's equitable for them and that they're actually going to be relying on. A lot of individuals, those barriers are very tight for them. When we talk about our sexual offenders who are in the program also, we want to make sure that, hey, is this something that's going to be applicable for them? You know, the process, everything is not for everybody. And when it comes to those individuals that have that particular background that are sexual offenders, we want to make sure that their accommodations also are met in the program. And if you didn't know, individuals as sexual offenders that have been in the program are the least to recidivate when they're going back to jail, because they know that their opportunities can be a lot lessened when it comes for their outlook and they're successful. So when they find housing, when they find jobs of their background or their stature, they tend to keep them and they tend not to lose them in the process. Individuals that want to help these people, they're looking for just that minute part of hope. And by hope, I mean, they want to know, are there individuals that are out there that want to work with them and work with them successfully? A lot of the times they get their back turned on to them. They get no quite often, and they want to know, is there someone that's out there that's going to help us through this process? By working with these individuals and doing the assessments, you're building a relationship with them. Not just the collaboration from your partners that are outside of the community, but a relationship with them and maybe also with their family. A lot of the times these individuals that come home to home plans that don't work, you know, because there's the lack of communication between themselves and maybe family members, and not just family members, but people that are also in the community. We want to make sure that we're sitting down with them and building a rapport to make sure that they're getting the correct information. Each person is different. Each one of us are different. So we have different likes, we have different dislikes. So we want to make sure that this person that we're talking to, not just building a rapport and a relationship, but giving them the best service, that's all the provisions that we have with them. So we bring some of them to our reentry councils. And why do we do that? Because we end up, what we tend to do most of the time when we're putting people in positions, we want to make the laws and we want to make up things for them, but we don't ask them what is it that they need. And in that process of asking them what they need, we can supplement how we can help them and make sure that they're receiving the best care possible. So ask the questions and start knowing who are the individuals that you work with. Building that rapport is more important than anything else. We find that when we do this, we're actually not just building rapport, but what we're doing is we're getting to know what are the best needs for this particular person that you're going to be putting through this program. Every program is different, and we want to make sure that they're getting the best service regardless of who they are and where they come from. in this position that I am as a case manager, I can't deny someone because of their background for the help that was needed. So that's why we have an open array of individuals that we work with Mary Ellen with 211, who just has an array of information that helps us out daily on the jail. We've got together as a collaborative group from our reentry teams, and the best thing to do is actually bring the source to 16 reentry council here in Fredericksburg. What I did is we got our council together and we started going into the jail as a collaborative event. And what they did, they can ask those questions to the specific person to meet their needs. So when it came to housing, that was one of the biggest elephants in the room. How can I get to where I'm going to if I don't have that job? Or if a landlord's not gonna, have me come into their facility or their place of living to make sure that, hey, am I a responsible person? So like I said, going back to building that rapport and that relationship with the people that we're actually giving that information to, we wanna make sure that they're the best fit. And all of us, we need to take a step back just to make sure that we're doing the right things for these individuals. We want to see longevity for those that are coming out from incarceration. We want to make sure that they're successful in all of the ramifications when it comes to whether it be housing, whether it comes to job opportunities, or whether it just becomes to their everyday living. These things have to be set up and put in place to make sure that these things that the individuals need, we're supplying them and doing the best that we can do. Mary Ellen, that's all I have.
Okay, Marshall, I have a question for you. So during COVID, if someone, you got a notice from the jail, somebody returning from incarceration, what was the process that you had to go through that changed during COVID that because you didn't necessarily meet them face to face? What kind of roadblocks were you running into strictly because of COVID?
Well, one of the things that we did during COVID, we have an open room here at probation and parole. So at that office, I was actually able to meet them by social distancing with them. Also, for those that didn't have Zoom, we would do polycoms, and we would set up things with the counselors so we can actually talk to them over either polycom or either over the phone. That was one of the things that we did. One of the things that we were also able to do is doing pre-release and post-release services. In the pre-release, we would give them an assessment. In that assessment, they would actually fill out all of the information as if they were getting ready to come into the program. So that gave us a great broad of information of letting us know what were the things that that particular individual did. So having pre-release services for those individuals, you're actually meeting them 6 to 8 months prior to them coming out. So you're finding out what is it that's going to be that they need first, what is it that they're going to have trouble with, and then you're finding out what their charges are prior. So that helped out a lot when we sent that information to them as a PDF, and then they were able to fill out all of that information for the individuals that have been incarcerated. So that was a one-on-one. They'd call us from the institutions with their counselors, and you were able to talk to them right over the phone and then help them with the process.
So if somebody is coming out from incarceration and they have most likely to go to a shelter, what means do you have to get them so they don't have to go into a shelter?
Right. So a lot of the times, that's why I said the basis of finding out with their family. If there's a family person that's set there, we have Micah, which is the homeless place here in Fredericksburg. We're working with the COC, and they're placed in, they call the hotline, and then they're actually placed on a list. And going through that list, they go by severity. Someone who's just coming out from incarceration, maybe someone that their home plan didn't fall through and they're needing of services right away. We have certain funding dollars that we can help them stay into hotels, which is not a full fix, but it's a temporary fix until we can get them on their feet and making sure that they have a job. We have a lot of different contracts, so they're getting jobs once they come out. So that 1 to 2 weeks as a Band-Aid actually helps them get on their feet to actually have that job and then getting that income in so they can move forward with trying to find some stability.
Great. Well, thank you both. And this has been great information. Two very different programs, but who are in place to prevent all these evictions that have been on the books since the beginning of COVID. Vincent, do we have questions?
Yes. So we had one question, I think, can go to Marshall and Mary Ellen. So which homeless shelter is best for those who have to register for sex offender charges in the I assume in the area?
So when somebody does call 211, and if they identify as a returning citizen, one of the first questions we do ask them is about their charges, because that absolutely affects housing resources that we can provide to them. And so the listings that we have, if they deal with returning citizens, most of them say they'll go on a case-by-case basis. So it kind of depends on what the charges are. And shelters are the same way. Shelters have very specific requirements that they will allow people into. Generally, I refer to Marshall because he knows all of this stuff. He knows these people. And I will tell you, anybody with a sex offense is the hardest person to find housing for. And we know that the resources are very, very limited. We do have a couple, but yeah, most of the times we refer to people like Marshall who can provide that extra assistance so that somebody can be housed when they're returned. Marshall?
Yes. One of the things that we did here in Fredericksburg is I work with private landlords. Because of working in probation and the stipulation that individuals have on their background and their barriers, we want to make sure that not always you have a good fit, but you want to try to make a conducive environment for those that are actually going to be placed together. What we did is we had 4 reentry houses that were opened up by a private landlord, and they worked out really well. That's been within the last 5 years. Is the list long? Yes, the waiting list is very long because of the individuals that have went through the probationary period of being in the houses. They actually opt out. And by opting out, basically 2 of the houses have actually turned into regular facilities. So they're actually regular rental properties. And by saying that, that means that the individuals that were on probation there are no longer on probation. They actually went through the program, became successful, they kept their jobs. And 2 of those houses were actually sex offender houses. And the individuals that work there and actually live there have been living there for the last couple of years and doing well. So finding those providers that want to work with you within the community is the best thing for those individuals that are coming out from incarceration that have that particular barrier or that background. And also, like I said, you have the stipulations from probation, so that helps you with where they can be placed and where they can't be placed when you're looking at their information from probation. It lets you know, can I place a person here because they're a sexual offender, or can I not because of distance and the priorities that come with their restrictions from probation.
So Dee, I have a question for you. Can you tell us how long the process was to get the eviction prevention program up and running and being able to work with clients?
Sure. Actually, it was pretty quick. We started kind of the discussions back in the summer of 2020. And then in November of 2020, we received a resilience grant from Act for Alexandria, which really gave us the funding to be able to start the heart of the work. Because we were able to hire a case manager as well as an outreach coordinator at that time, so that we could actually start doing what it was that we had set forth to do, other than it just being me. And so now it's just myself and the case manager, but we're looking to hire service navigators for additional assistance for the residents in the area.
So, see if you can sum this up. What has the pandemic taught you? What lessons have you learned going forward that you're going to be able to take what you've learned and implement them once we quote unquote get back to normal?
Well, we really truly recognize that what we were doing with AEPP was not something that would end with the pandemic. We could see that the services were necessary to go on after the pandemic is over. And as we start to look at the future, we wanted to look at prevention services, education, doing more of those things out into the community, helping renters to understand what their rights are with respect to reading a lease and understanding what it means to have a lease. And just the different questions and nuances that we've gotten with respect to rental assistance have lended to some of that information that we recognize there's a need for continued assistance with respect to renters' needs of utilities, rental assistance, transportation. We're getting requests now for storage, moving expenses. We're also helping with hotels. So in between trying to find a place and there's a gap. I have to leave this place on Friday, but I can't get to the next place until 2 weeks from now. What do I do with my family? So being able to have those things set up and really building the collaboration with the community partners that we have in response to some of the needs that we're finding as we meet with the residents out in the community.
Marshall, what's your plans for when we go back to normal?
What's normal?
Yeah.
Right now, it has been really difficult because of with the institutions being closed and not being able to visit them. So like I said, we came up with the idea of actually sending those PDF forms in that format for them to actually sit down. We just started doing the panel where we can actually see them and they can see us and we can sit down and have those meetings together. But really having that paperwork done the correct way and for them to have that for the counselors there at the institution helps out a lot. One of the things that we're also going to be doing moving forward is with the reentry dorms that we have in the areas, having us to go in and for the ones that aren't open yet and having that the Zoom meetings like we're doing here, but having Polycom set up in the institution so we can actually have those group meetings for those individuals that aren't coming out right away. So I think that's going to be something that's going to be very helpful moving forward, having the session set up to where you can actually see a group anywhere between 5 or 10 people and not being able to be there, but able to, give them the information that they need. It'll be just like what we could do in Google Classroom where you actually can teach the class and everything with the individuals there and doing it live. So I think that's going to be helpful moving forward, trying to do something like that within the institutions and then also in the offices. So we've learned a lot during the pandemic and how we've been so resourceful as even what we're doing today, I think is just showing us, our longevity of how we're just going to continue to try to help those in this community and the population.
Vincent, are there any more questions?
Yes. So Dee already answered this in the chat, but do you all provide services to Norfolk, Virginia?
We currently only provide services to Northern Virginia, but we do provide services to anyone is eligible. So there are no eligibility requirements. What we do is we will look at each client on an individualized basis to find services based on what their needs are. And one of the things that we do is we try to meet people where they are. So if that means going out into the community to meet an individual at a coffee shop or at their home, for instance, we have been able to do that.
Yeah, my coverage, I cover the Northern Virginia area, up almost to DC, Fairfax area, all the way down to Richmond. I jump over and do East and West Culpeper, almost towards to Charlottesville. I have a counterpart, Miss Monique Ricks, who actually is in Hampton, Virginia. So she covers that area down there towards Norfolk, and she takes that part. And then we cover out towards Haynesville and jump over to down near Chesapeake. So I'm a statewide provider for DOC. So I do all the institutions in the jails.
And then Mary Ellen, I don't know if you want to speak about 211's coverage.
We cover every county and city in the state of Virginia. So if a person needs assistance in Norfolk, they can just call us, tell us what zip code they're in, where they want the services, and we'll see what's going to be available for them in that area. Yeah. I also have a counterpart who is out of Norfolk, who is a community engagement specialist as well. So I can contact me and I can give you that contact information.
Awesome. Then another question about eligibility. So do your organizations and your partnering organizations screen clients for prior military service and or eligibility for veterans housing programs?
So we do 211. We do. We ask every person that calls us if they're active duty or a veteran. If they do indicate that they are a veteran, then we do have specific programs, housing programs, employment programs that serve the veterans. And so we can hook them up with that as well. If they are calling on behalf of a veteran, we will do the same thing. So if a caregiver or a family member or even an adult child calls and identifies them as a veteran, then we can get those services for them, yes.
And we do the same thing. We ask the question so that we can tailor services to the individual. And so if they do indicate that they are a veteran, there are veteran services within the city of Alexandria and Northern Virginia corridor that we can refer them to.
And the eligibility for the veterans in our program also, it's within the eligibility of 1 year. So those veterans that I work with inside the institution are also eligible for the program and the funding, as long as they meet the requirements within the year of their eligibility of coming out from release. So they're also eligible to have funding and stuff as a source as anyone else.
Awesome, great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I mean, we have a couple of minutes. So would leave it up to you all as panelists for any kind of final thoughts on housing and kind of things we can learn and take forward as kind of major lessons that we've learned from this pandemic time.
One thing I wanted to put out, I sit with the COC Council here in Fredericksburg. As collaborative individuals, I say each year we have a funding process. At the end of the year, we have funding dollars or allocated funds that are sometimes left over. We were coming together to think of how can we actually have those funding dollars or rollover funds that we have to where we can allocate those funds toward housing. And that each corporation that we work with, or your people that are in your reentry groups, they can actually come together and see, every year we have our budgets, know what we have in the last couple of months. We can look 5-10 years back for those that are still with their companies, and we can see allocated funds that have been left over at the end of the year, and how can we better serve and use those funding dollars towards housing as a pot for different areas that we serve, whether it be Northern Virginia, Southern, Southwest. How can we use that money to go towards housing when we have individuals that, say, for instance, it's not that we always want to have somebody with a Band-Aid effect and, we want to look for longevity, but with those monies that aren't spent or used, how can we use that allocation better when it comes to housing? So that's a question that I pose to everyone who's actually here today listening to what we're talking about.
Dee, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I guess, again, just looking at overall housing and the affordability especially within the Northern Virginia corridor, just in the city of Alexandria, for the average person working a minimum wage job, they have to work over 100 hours just to afford a efficiency apartment. And so looking at that and understanding that we have to look at how can we build more affordable housing at the income levels that are needed for those that are living in these areas right now. In the city, we're seeing, like I said, larger and larger families. I was working with a family just the other day where she had 7 individuals living in a household, and we were trying to find housing and having, serious roadblocks because of the number of people in the household. And so we have to be able to accommodate those things. And right now, we just do not have the supply.
Yeah, and I will echo what both of you have said, that housing is going to continue to be a huge issue for all of us. And once the moratorium ends and the evictions start moving through, we know it's going to be pretty much a crisis across the state of Virginia. And we have to be kind of prepared to deal with that. On that note, I want to thank both Marshall and Dee for your time today. You guys have provided so much great information. I hope everybody who's attended has learned something. Vincent has said all the slides will be available. We are recording this session, and that will be available at the end of the series, at the end of May. They will be put on YouTube for the Fairfax Reentry Council YouTube channel, so you can go there and review any of the sessions. We invite you to our 3 sessions that are left, Thursday and next Tuesday and Thursday. It's been a great series, and there's been a lot of really, really good information presented, and hopefully it will provide some seed and thoughts onto how to move forward through the rest of the year, and hopefully that this pandemic is ending quickly and we can all get back together and see each other in person. So thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate it, and go and enjoy the rest of this beautiful day. Thank you.